Robbie. So, Monday came. Obviously it did. Mondays always come. That's the whole problem with Mondays. I told myself over the weekend that I was being ridiculous, that whatever that feeling was, the one I'd been calling the campaign, the one I'd been staring at the ceiling about, was just stress. Professional stress. Completely normal. Completely explainable. Absolutely nothing to do with Laura Reyes and the way she moved her coffee 2 inches to the left without saying a word. I was being ridiculous. I showed up at 6:55 on Monday morning. I always come in at 7:30. I have come in at 7:30 every single day for 3 years. 6:55. I'm not going to explain that. The office was empty when I arrived. Obviously. Because normal people do not come in at 6:55 on a Monday morning unless they are trying to establish territory, which I was not doing. I was simply arriving. Early, for professional reasons. I set up my side of the shared workspace very carefully. Laptops and a tree, center left, notebook glass beside it. 2 pen, because I always lose one. Coffee rice bass, right side, away from the laptop, because I spill things when I'm distracted, and I was not going to be distracted. Everything exactly where I wanted it. Everything under control. She walked in at 7:03. Auburn hair slightly damp from the morning. Black blazer. Different from last week. This one with a small gold detail on the collar that I absolutely did not notice immediately. Coffee already in hand. She'd stopped somewhere on the way in. She smelled like something clean and warm, like expensive soap and cold air. I noticed that too, unfortunately. She looked at my side of the desk, then at her side, then at me. She said, "You came in early." I said, "I always come in early." She looked at me for exactly 1 second longer than necessary. She did not say anything else. She sat down, and just like that, we were sharing an office. About 20 minutes in, she said, without looking up from her screen, she said, "We should establish some ground rules." I looked up. Ground rules. For the space. So we're not in each other's way. In each other's way, as if that was the problem I was worried about. I said, "Sure. What did you have in mind?" She said, "No unnecessary talking during deep work hours. 9 to 12, 2 to 5. If something needs to be discussed, it can wait or be handled over message." I said, "Fine." She said, "Meetings in the conference room, not here. This space stays clean." I said, "Also fine." She said, "And..." She paused slightly. Just slightly. "No eating at the desk. It's distracting." I looked at the granola bar sitting directly beside my notebook that I had placed there approximately 40 minutes ago. I put it in my bag without a word. She was already looking back at her screen. I could have sworn the corner of her mouth moved. Just barely. Just for a second. The rules lasted until about 10:30. The first one to break them was me. Obviously. I was working through a targeting strategy for the Hail campaign, and I hit a wall. One of those walls where you've been staring at the same problem for so long that your brain just stops cooperating. And before I could stop myself, I said out loud, "Why would a 30-year-old with disposable income care about legacy?" It wasn't directed at her. It was just thinking out loud, which I do sometimes, which I forgot I did until it was already out of my mouth during what was technically a deep work hour. I looked up, expecting, I don't know, the look. The composed, unreadable expression that meant she was filing away. Evidence of my unprofessionalism. Instead, she said, still looking at her screen, "Because they don't. That's your problem. You're trying to sell legacy to people who think legacy is what their parents cared about." I stared at her. She still hadn't looked up. I said, "Then what do I sell them?" She said, "The opposite of their parents. Sell them the feeling of having figured something out before everyone else did. I sat with that for a second. It was exactly right. It reframed the entire campaign in one sentence. One sentence that I had been trying to find for 2 weeks. I said, I stopped. Tried to sound less impressed than I was. That works. She said, I know. She went back to her work like she hadn't just quietly solved my biggest problem before 10:30 on a Monday morning. I went back to my work too. My brain was doing that thing again. I told it to stop. By 11, we had both broken every single rule. She'd asked me twice about campaign metrics. I'd asked her once about the Hale brand voice. We'd somehow ended up with both our notebooks open on the same side of the desk. Not touching, but close. And there were 2 empty coffee cups lined up beside each other like they'd always lived there. It was easy. That's the word that scared me most. It was easy in a way that working with people I actually liked wasn't always easy. Easy like we were operating on the same frequency without having to tune anything. She'd start a thought and I'd already know where it was going. I'd hit a problem and she'd solve it before I finished explaining it. At one point, we were both looking at the same screen. She'd rolled her chair slightly closer to see something I was showing her, and I was talking about audience segmentation, and then I just stopped talking because she was close. And she smelled like that thing again, and her eyes were doing that focused thing where she was reading carefully, and her lips were pressed slightly together in concentration, and I stopped talking. She looked up. You stopped, I said. Sorry, lost my train of thought. She looked at me for a moment, then she looked back at the screen. Segmentation by aspiration, not demographics, she said. That's where you were going. It was exactly where I was going. This was a problem. My phone rang at 2:15. Daniel, my boyfriend. I looked at the screen, then at Lara. She wasn't looking at me. She was typing, completely absorbed. Didn't even register the sound. I picked up. Hey, you. His voice was warm, familiar. The voice of someone who knew me and loved me and had absolutely no idea what kind of Monday I was having. I said, hey. He asked how my day was going. I said, good. He said he was thinking about dinner. Did I want him to cook or should they order in? I said, cook. Whatever you want. He laughed. That easy laugh he had, and said I sounded distracted and was I okay? And I said, yes, I'm fine, just busy. I'll see you tonight. He said, love you. I said, love you too. I hung up. I looked at my screen. From the corner of my eye, I could see Lara still typing. She hadn't reacted, hadn't moved, hadn't given any indication she'd heard a single word of that conversation. I looked at my hands on the keyboard. I thought about the way Daniel's laugh sounded. Easy and familiar and warm. I thought about the way Lara had said, segmentation by aspiration, not demographics, like it was obvious, like she'd just been waiting for me to get there. I opened my campaign document. I typed 3 words and then deleted them. I typed them again. I deleted them again. End of day, 6:30. The office had emptied around us again. Naturally, without either of us suggesting it. Without either of us being the first to say we were staying. I was packing up my bag, laptop, notebook, both pens, found them both this time, which felt like a small victory I needed. Lara was closing down her side of the desk, neat and methodical the way she did everything. She had this thing where she straightened everything into a specific order before she left. Laptop, notebooks, 1 pen, phone. Like she was resetting the space for the next day. I'd noticed that about her. I noticed a lot of things about her. That was new. I was zipping up my bag when she said, not looking at me, still straightening things. You were right about the 35+ segment. I stopped. Earlier. In the meeting. You pushed back on Marcus's instinct to go younger, and you were right. The aspirational angle works across brackets if the visual language is right. I looked at her. She was looking at her desk, aligning her notebook with the edge of the table. Lara Reyes did not say things like this. Lara Reyes did not tell people they were right. Lara Reyes operated in a language of composed neutrality and the occasional devastating observation. She did not offer, unprompted, at the end of a long Monday while straightening a notebook, the information that someone else had been correct about something. I said, "Thank you." She nodded, picked up her phone, stood up, and then, just before she turned to leave, she glanced at the 2 empty coffee cups still sitting side by side on the desk. She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away immediately either. Then she left. I stood there for a second, just me in the empty office and the 2 coffee cups and the city going dark outside the window. I picked up my bag. I turned off my desk lamp. I walked to the elevator, and somewhere between the 6th floor and the lobby, I had a thought that I had been very successfully not having for 2 weeks. Not a big thought, not a dramatic revelation, not the kind of thing that comes with music and a realization and everything suddenly making sense. Just a quiet, small, devastating little thought that sat down in the middle of my chest and made itself completely at home. Oh no. I got home at 7. Daniel had cooked pasta, the good kind, with a sauce he made from scratch that took 2 hours and that he only made when he wanted to do something nice. The apartment smelled warm and familiar. He kissed me when I walked in and asked how my day was, and poured me a glass of wine. And I sat at the kitchen counter and watched him move around the kitchen, and I thought, this is good. This is really good. This is exactly the life I wanted. I thought about 2 coffee cups sitting side by side on a desk. I drank my wine. I said, "My day was good. Really good, actually." He smiled. "Yeah? Yeah." I wasn't lying. That was almost worse. That night, lying in the dark, Daniel asleep beside me, the ceiling doing that thing where it just exists above you while your brain refuses to stop. I thought about everything I was not going to think about. The way she said my name. Robbie. 2 syllables. Everyone said it the same way, and somehow when she said it, it landed differently. Like it meant something slightly more specific in her mouth, the gold detail on her blazer collar that I had definitely not noticed. Segmentation by aspiration, not demographics. You were right. The 2 coffee cups. I pressed my hands over my face in the dark. I said, out loud to nobody, to the ceiling, to the version of myself that had walked into that office on Monday morning thinking she had everything under control. I said, I have a problem. Not the campaign, not the promotion, not any of the very normal professional things I should have been losing sleep over. Lara Reyes, that was my problem. Lara Reyes, who smelled like expensive soap and cold air, who solved my campaign problem before 10:30, who straightened her desk like a ritual, who said you were right like it cost her something, who looked at 2 coffee cups for exactly 1 second longer than she needed to. I had a problem. And then, because the universe apparently has a very specific sense of humor, my phone lit up on the nightstand. A message from my best friend, Maya. Still coming to your office tomorrow for lunch, right? Can't wait. Also, you sound weird in your texts lately. What's going on with you? I stared at the ceiling. Maya had known me for 11 years. She had seen me through every version of myself I had ever been. She was the kind of person who looked at you once and already knew the thing you hadn't said yet. She was going to take one look at me. One look at me and one look at Lara, and she was going to know everything. Everything I had barely just admitted to myself in the dark at, I looked at my phone, 11:47 p.m. on a Monday night. I put my phone face down on the nightstand. I closed my eyes. Wednesday was going to be so much worse than I thought.